we were talking about the fact that the horror genre is kind of played to me by the early 80s, and that's why 84 it was so easy to call an end to those movies. And it is Nightmare on Elm Street that for me takes the genre and flips it in a way that it still hasn't really come back from that. And maybe Terrifier is the first one to have a good combination of both the silent killer, but also have the guy have some sort of personality. Because with all these killers beforehand, they're extremely generic. Prowler and Friday the 13th Part 3, you don't make the plots are different, but as far as the killer themselves, they're just the shape, if you will, right? That's what makes Halloween so frightening. There is no backstory. There is no vengeance for Michael Myers. His name isn't even Michael Myers. It is called The Shape because it's the shape of death that's coming to get you. And that just becomes old hat by the early 80s because so many people are trying to cash in on this thing that you can make a movie like Saturday the 14th. But when Nightmare comes out, it just breathed so much life into the horror genre because it's like we can add personality. The killer can talk. Like, oh shit, the killer can talk. Now, as Ben Burgess says, does Freddy turn into Bugs Bunny? Yes. And all the killers that talk. Is it Slumber Party Massacre 2, which is where they totally shit the bed? The first one, love it. And I'm glad you brought that up, JG, because it's a very dark comedy and commentary because it's all women. The driller killer getting the drill cut off is the most over the top, like we're cutting off the dick thing that you're gonna see. But again, I think that's also this call out of this genre is stale. And by that, when they make the sequel to that movie, which I don't think that woman was involved in, right? She wasn't involved in the sequel, was she?
No. The sequel is the one with the ghost of the Psychobilly band leader.
Oh my god, the dude is breakdancing and playing.
I love that movie for all the wrong reasons. I just think it's ridiculous. I enjoy it.
It's nothing makes sense in that film, you know. Again, but that's the whole. The killer has to have a very dark sense of humor, a dark personality, but throw in these really cheap jokes to make us laugh before he kills somebody, because it's not about fear anymore. It's about dark entertainment. And the end part of the 80s is definitely not about scaring you anymore. It's just, how can we make dark entertainment? The puppet master.
You know what there's a really good example of that in the late 80s. It's a little British film that I don't think many people have seen outside of weirdos like me, but there was a movie that was made in Britain. It's a parody and satire of the Halloween and Friday the 13th films. It's literally just called Unmasked Part 25. And it's about a slasher killer named Jackson who is like really lonely, and he begins to question why he has like an existential crisis. He's like, why am I doing all these killings, being resurrected? I just want to fall in love. And finally he meets like a blind woman who can't like see his deformed face, so he falls in love with her.
Well, that's my favorite part about Toxic Avenger.
I was going to ask if that was before or after Toxic Avenger.
This is 88, so I think it's like
after.
Probably after, yeah.
Yeah.
No, Toxic Avenger is 86, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Jason, your description of Freddy was Schwarzenegger in all of his movies.
That's also after, because Schwarzenegger doesn't talk until after
the Terminator.
Yeah.
But that's what he's doing, right? I mean, I hadn't really thought about him doing Freddy Krueger, but and it begins with "I'll be back" for him, I think, as a tagline. But then subsequently, "Stick around" in Commando and all that shit. Right? There are a lot of them in Commando.
Well, by the time you get to Commando and then Predator and all these movies, we're waiting for the action guy line.
Yeah.
And that the canon movies is really good. about having insane action guy lines, especially like in the Death Wish movies. Which, again, that's a different episode.
But Jason, I sent you a while back, you and Ben, a link to a movie from 1982. It's a Canadian kind of slasher film, but there was a backstory of sorts called Humongous.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine that JG's seen it because it's sort of a cult classic. Did you get a chance to watch it? Not saying it's good.
You saw Humongous, JG?
Yeah, I know Humongous. Paul Lynch directed it. I'm a fan of a lot of his stuff. Same guy that did Prom Night.
Yes. And what was Humongous before Prom Night or right after?
I think it was probably right after, I want to say.
And one of the criticisms of the cinematography, it was a signature of his, I guess, is that it was a little too dark. The acting was very uneven, which makes it a lot of fun. But the monster in question, the Jason like being, actually sort of reminds me of the being in what is it, Barbarian, because it's the product of rape, and it's an oversized, brutish individual who, in this case, isn't really looking to nurse children for the rest of its life, but instead is just looking for food, as I recall it.